Okay, here we go. So this is the schematic for my ontology and my framework of reality. It has utility. So if you want to use it, this is it. This is the guide. We'll start with the definition of the ontology. Ontology is basically the understanding of what reality is, or a theory of reality. That's what we begin with from first principles. The core ontology from my framework, and by the way, all of this is based on philosophy of mind, systems thinking, complexity science, quantum physics. This isn't spirituality, because spirituality, while it's good, is a language or an interface to try and understand a higher order reality without the limitations that are clearly present when you're looking through the lens of the last 200 years of scientific discovery. The core ontology that operates this model is called non-causal experiential relational monism. Okay. This is the understanding that all of reality is a single unified informational field. And informational field could be metaphorical here, but that's what we're calling it. We're calling it a single unified information field. It is non-causal in my ontology because intent can jump out of the render or the simulation without linear steps. And this is something we can observe. Even on a subatomic level, the existence of whatever it is can jump cut the simulation, let's say, jump cut the simulation without linear steps. It can just pop into existence, as I sometimes say. So that's non-causal. Experiential, because everything is experience. We do not have anything outside of experience. And then relational, because everything is dependent on relations to other things. Okay, so that's what the ontology is. So forget about all that. It's just understanding that all of reality is one single informational field that we all exist in, which is non-causal. Okay. Then in this system, people and objects are essentially nodes. They're points of data, okay, in the field, in the information field. And consciousness is the oscillator. It's the frequency that determines how the data vibrates. Okay. So consciousness as the oscillator, the individual as the node, the point of data in this informational field. In terms of how this is backed up, it's backed up by neural oscillation theory, quantum cognition, and the fact that we are the observer and the observed. Our brain waves, which are oscillations, act as the measurement device that collapses reality into existence. Probability waves into what I call a render. And a render is basically just a rendered reality. Okay. Going a little bit deeper into that before we move on, when you look at neuroscience, you see that what we call reality is actually just a controlled hallucination. It's a hallucination that's powered by a predictive model, which is our mind, and loosely based on some data that's received from the information field. Okay, that's what reality is. It's not you experiencing an actual thing. It's interfacing with something as well as creating something that's backed up by neuroscience as well. Even the concept of there not being an actual self. The self is a cognitive illusion in the same way that an optical illusion is an optical illusion. So I have something that I built in lucid dreaming called the Red Room. So the Red Room is the high intensity 0-point field of pure potential. It's the source code layer where all things exist as floating assets that are not yet solid and can be moved or deleted by the architect's intent. So you're either an architect or an NPC in this world. I'll get into that later. You know, in this red room, you can imagine a red room where you are no longer an entity, but there is let's just say a table floating in front of you as a selectable item, as if you're in some kind of creator or editor mode. You're looking at anything, but you can put anything in that frame. You can put your girlfriend in that frame, put your girlfriend in the red room. She's a floating asset in your render. You're in the red room. You see in the middle, there's a table floating. It's almost like you just selected it, but you're not really there, but you are there because awareness is there. And you now get to just play with that, create other things, and this is a pure potential room where you can bring anything into existence. The render, what is the render? So the render is waking life. It's the 3D projection of the code. Most of what you see is a bland render, a low resolution environment designed to keep the meat suit stable. Okay. And what's the meat suit? The meat suit is your biological interface. It's the minimum density requirement for this level of experience. It's a carbon-based transducer that allows the architect to strike the code into physical reality. Now, this transducer theory is extremely scientific because that is exactly what happens. There's no reality that you're perceiving, it's actually what it is your biological self is actually acting as a transducer to create a localized experience. This is proven fact. That's what happens when you, for example, if you were to receive some sense data from the world, that electrical signal gets converted into something else, which is a movie in your head, or whatever it is. That's not the real thing. That's not the thing. Your body is a meat suit. It is a biological interface. It is a transducer. That's a fact, a reality. So that's that. And then there are other terms I've added to this. Ojas is an ancient Vedic term, but it's essentially your marrow or your life force. It's the high fidelity energy required to maintain your frequency. And this frequency can be siphoned by NPCs in the render. It can be drained in many different things that we do to our bodies and our behavior, lack of sleep, other things, bad food, whatever. These things drain your Ojas, and then there are other entities and NPCs that siphon your Ojas and things, and even feedback from the render itself can siphon your Ojas. So you got to be careful of that. And then we move to the energy siphons. So energy siphons are level 1 biological or social hacks. There's something in another entity or in your environment that hacks your biology on a low level, on a survival level. We have to remember that the meat suit is an ancient transducer. It has to be what it is because this is the density required for our consciousness. But it is a very ancient transducer. So it has these very primitive hacks that can be accessed. And so level 1 biological or social hacks designed to trigger empathy or guilt to drain your Ojas and throttle your potential to a lower level baseline. Okay, because the more of your marrow, the more of your Ojas that is siphoned, the lower your operating level is on a daily basis. Okay, and in order to increase that, you need to reduce the siphons, the energy siphons. And then something I call the wigs, which is the masks and social governors that people wear. They're generated assets used to stabilize the render. So an architect will see through the wigs to the raw code beneath what's being presented to them, right? Then there's the operational states. You move to the operational states, okay? Now, I know that I'm using programming language to express these somewhat philosophical ideas, and I'm even using mythic language as well, like the law of the bone and marrow, which I'll get to. But there's a reason for this, is because language can either get mythic or it can get technical, and it needs to go somewhere for you to get to the next level of truth. You can't stay in the level 1 bland render language lexicon, because then you're going to be stuck there. Okay, just to interface with others who want to understand this type of thing. So anyway, these are the operational states. You've got absolute zero, a state of total emotional decoupling. You are at zero thermal noise. You're not reactive. You're a data transfer protocol. Okay, it prevents negative environments from heating up your processing core. All right. Then there's high frequency mode, the state of active projection. You increase your internal oscillation till the render snaps to your intent. This creates phase lock, the moment fluid potential becomes a stable physical event. Okay. The whoosh. This is another concept. This is a static or transitional noise felt during a major shift in the simulation. We do not fear the static. It's the sound of the system recalculating a new render for you. Okay. The whoosh can be any moment where you've kind of just had a moment of awakening, or a moment of just switching modes from being at level 1, which is essentially the monkey mode, you could say, or whatever. And then you've just whooshed into level 2 or 3. Okay. There's various levels as well. Now we move to the law of the bone and marrow. This is something that I'm writing a book about. But anyway, the bone is the unbreakable structural reality. It's the logistics, physical security, essential tokens of the render. These are bone. Okay. Then there's the marrow. The marrow is the high fidelity life force, the Ojas, the internal coherence within the bone. So the signal that we have within us, or the marrow within the bone. And the strategy is to ignore the skin, okay, which is status, optics, all these kind of peripheral things. These are the skin. And you use the bone to protect the marrow. If a structure becomes brittle, like a failing economy that we have around us now, you prepare the vertical cut, okay? And this is when we get to the strategic maneuvers. The vertical cut is a surgical severance from a failing node. You don't quit. You surgically remove your informational string from one environment and initiate an immediate render into a growth node. Okay. Okay, and then finally we have the Zonked Nodes. Okay, and these are the ghosts, the NPCs operating on low power mode. They are the 2D assets in your field. We utilize the master oscillation entrainment to ensure that high frequency dictates the local render rather than being dragged down by their entropy. So if you are the master oscillator in an environment, then you become the attractor to these NPCs. An attractor is something that entrains those other oscillators to that specific attractor. And the reason why this happens is because NPCs don't have any other fallback in terms of where they can access anything else apart from the scripts that they're running. So that when you become the absolute zero or the high frequency master oscillator, you entrain others. You don't actually have to actually do anything specific. You internally oscillating as the master oscillator or the high frequency architect. And then that entrains others around you. This has been known for centuries, thousands of years. But anyway, it's been named differently, but this is the physics of it. That is the underpinning backbone of everything in terms of my ontology and how you can use it. Level 2 is the deep stack. Okay, so it's the hierarchy of levels. The simulation is structured in layers of coherence. To navigate, you must know where you are standing. Level 1, the baseline. Okay, the well-behaved simulation is powered by fear, social obligation, and biological survival. NPCs here, as mentioned before, are zonked nodes operating at 10% capacity, perpetually siphoned by the skin, which is the optics. Level 2, the negotiator. Okay, a state where the architect recognizes a simulation but still tries to bargain with it. This creates friction and lag. Level 3, the high frequency architect, the state of absolute zero. You no longer need to negotiate, you dictate. You see the red room, which is the source code room where you can create anything, create a mode, through the cracks in the render. Okay, because you have the local render, which is everything you can perceive, and then outside of your local render is essentially fog. And this is quantum physics. Anything that's not being perceived, you could say, is essentially fog until it is perceived. But then again, the local render is in you. You are not in the local render. If you follow the principle of being both the observer and the observed, which is what neuroscience teaches us we are. Level 4. Level 4 is the source. Pure non-causal potential, no meat suit required. At this level, you don't need a meat suit because you are the awareness, you are everything. You don't have any density as a transducer to create a local render anymore. So a local render does actually need a certain amount of density in the form of a biological transducer to experience what one might call a local render. Okay, it's a universe watching itself, so to speak, or the universe experiencing itself. Okay, so we'll go over it again. So level 1 is the baseline, level 2 is the negotiator, level 3 is the high frequency architect, and level 4 is the source itself. Okay, everyone is stuck in level 1, and a lot of people are stuck in level 1, which is the baseline, social obligation, biological survival. That's it. That's pretty much it for a lot of people. But if you want to go into the other levels, then it just unlocks so much potential in yourself, right? Now, there's something called the SIC, which is the system inhibitor kernel. It uses specific level 1 biological hacks to drag your frequency down. Okay, one of them I've called is these are my these are my personal ones, so they might be funny. The cuteness trap, a biological trigger used perceiving vulnerability to force the architect into an empathy loop, siphoning OJAS to sustain a low vibrational node. Okay, and there's another one called the Eeyore render. Okay, Eeyore from Winnie the Pooh. A social governor that uses persistent negativity or helplessness to create thermal noise, breaking your absolute zero state. That's another one. Number 3 is the anticipation hack. A temporal siphon. It forces you to allocate processing power to future fog that hasn't even rendered yet, leaving you depleted in the now. Okay. That now. Number 3, the mechanisms of master oscillation entrainment. This is the fun part where you get to entrain. When 2 oscillators are in proximity, the stronger frequency eventually pulls the weaker one into alignment. The architect's method, you do not argue with a level 1 NPC. You maintain a high intensity internal oscillation by refusing to drop your frequency to match their zonked state. You force their local render to entrain to yours. They become compliant or they simply de-render from your field because the frequency mismatch is too high for the simulation to sustain. Okay. Next part. Red room analytics. Before entering any high friction zone, the office, the meeting, the negotiation, perform a red room scan, identify assets. Who is a bone? Essential structure node. Who is a ghost? Low resolution background noise. Locate the siphons. Where is the potential for thermal noise? Set the system command. Define the desired phase lock outcome before the meat suit even enters the room. The observed and the observer. The quantum loop. Under experiential relational monism, the act of observation is the act of creation. The Western world is bland because the collective observation is bland. Your local render, though, is high resolution because your observation is high fidelity, if it is. Okay? The law, the more you ignore the skin and focus on the marrow, the more the simulation is forced to render the marrow to you. You are the measurement device that determines the quality of the reality you inhibit. Now remember, the marrow is the signal, it's the internal energy, it's the ojas, it's the life force. And you don't focus on the skin, which is the optics and all of that stuff, and the pleasing people, whatever. You focus on the marrow, bone as the structure, and the marrow as the life force within the structure, signal. Okay, and if you focus on the marrow, then the marrow will be rendered to you. That's how the simulation works. Okay, or the render, call it what you want. Finally, we get to the practical execution, the vertical cut. So the vertical cut is the ultimate system exit. It's not a horizontal move within the same level. It is an upward shift in density. You're surgically removing your OJAS, life force, from a terminal graveyard render, the UK, for example, and replanting it in a forge render, okay, or some other render, some other master render, of which there are few, but they exist in this world. Now, during the cut, which is the whoosh, the static, whoosh that I spoke about before, when you attempt the cut, that's when the static becomes highest. And this is the simulation's way of trying to hand off your data from one server to another. You need to maintain absolute zero until the new bone structure is locked. Okay. And that's it. That's all of that began, this, if you want to get some context on what all of this is, it began with me defining my own ontology, learning from the best philosophers out there, learning from what neuroscience tells us, learning from what quantum physics tells us to form a theory of reality, developed from first principles and never deviated from what science is telling us, even though non-causality is probably non-scientific, using the highest forms of mystical traditions and science to get to where we are, and then translating this into a language that actually matters for people